Hi everyone, welcome to Finding Joy in the Mundane. I am your host, Aya Nichols, and I'm really excited to be starting this series in Philippians, and I'm so excited that you're here because I'm really excited about the topics that we're going to be covering today and just how they all come together. So I will start off with my sister Tala, who had her 29th birthday in DC, and I just got to go celebrate that over the weekend. And I normally don't get to go over there, so this was really special to me. So while I was over there celebrating, we decided to go to a local bar. And I know that kind of like puts points on some Christians. So yeah, we went to a bar to celebrate her 29th birthday, and she is a Christian too. And yet we all went to this bar so that way we can celebrate her birthday. She wanted to dance, and the first thing I noticed when I walked into the bar was the fact that there were priests there. And all I could think about in my head was, well, a priest walked into a bar. And that's like the beginning of every joke. And yet here I am in real life in DC with a priest. Not just one, maybe like 10 priests with their collar, with their thing, all dressed up in their robe, ministering at what? 9, 10 o'clock at night to people around them, just talking. And I'm looking around and I'm like, what is happening? What did I just walk into? This is not a Christian-owned, Christian-like partnered bar. This is like a bar that just is known for its parties. They were having a single party right next door, and like that's what they're for. And yet all I can see were just a bunch of priests talking to people, and then a bunch of priests carrying around music instruments, and I'm like, what is happening here? So after a little bit, my sister goes up to one of them, and apparently he is like a priest in training. Him and his fellow priests were there because they have a once a month ministry to where they go to this bar and they talk to people and then they connect with them and make relationships. I stood there in my tank top and jeans, and I'm sitting here staring at him like, you're a Catholic priest? And he said, yes. And you're here. And he said, yes. He said, this is one of our ministries. Nothing has ever brought me so much joy or has shown me what ministry really looks like than seeing this. Because he was exactly around the people who needed Jesus the most, when they needed him the most. Every person that went to this bar on a Friday night was looking for something, and they were right there to have that answer. And I couldn't believe it. I spent probably most of my time in that bar talking to this priest and then to the other people in the congregation that had come to support them. Heaven forbid your church were to ask you to go to a bar, to just sit there, have a drink with your friends, have some appetizers. Heaven forbid. I went and I sat next to some of the other people. I didn't even know they were part of the church until I was talking to them, and they said, yeah, we're just here supporting them. They were having water. I didn't know that. I didn't care. And this is coming from a person who was a non-believer, and having all of those preconceived notions of a non-believer coming and like addressing a person who is from church, and they're sitting there in a bar, and you're like, why are you even here? They were here supporting the church. It's like going to a potluck. And I couldn't help but to feel so encouraged by the way God is moving, because this is the way I view ministry and have always viewed ministry. When I was in seminary, I decided to go to Florida when they had that crisis, and we were all there for relief. And it was a week long, and I felt really proud. I have been to other mission trips before. I've been to Australia. I've been to Hamilton Beach. I've been to all these different places for ministry. So like, that's what drove me. I loved ministry. I love ministry. So we go to Florida, and we're staying with the church there, and we're doing everything that the relief people were telling us. We're helping build back houses. We're reaching out to the people who have been affected by the storm and everything, and how they lost all of their homes. And day after day, I would come across these people who had been living in these small tents, entire families, not just one or two people, more like 5 or 6 people staying in a tent so that way they could survive. And that got to me. And I think that's what they wanted. That's what short-term ministry wants you to do, is like see the afflicted and then have your heart burdened and then want to give back. And I had that experience. So it's not like it doesn't exist. The thing that got me while I was there was about 2 days into our mission trip, I met a woman who had a mother who was schizophrenic, who had experienced the storm and is going through all these different hardships. They don't even know where they're going to live. And since I had a schizophrenic mother, I decided to go talk to her. They're my people. And I'm connecting with her. I'm just talking about Jesus, talking about how he's going to be there for her, how if she were to go to church, that he will bring her the community she needs and be sustained by it. And the thing that got me was that she asked me if I could go with her on church that Sunday and sit with her. And I couldn't. I was leaving that Saturday night. I couldn't even sit with her during church, so that way she can first, meet the people, meet the pastor, know what she's actually getting into. I couldn't do that. And at that moment, I realized, why am I here? Am I here for her? Because this doesn't feel like I'm helping her. This just feels like I've teased her with Jesus and then pulled it away because she now has to do it on her own. I'll never know if she actually went to church. I'll never know if she was able to meet Jesus because I was only there for a week. It was only a mission trip that we were supposed to go for relief. After that experience, I couldn't do short-term ministry anymore. I refused to do short-term ministry. If I'm going to be there for 3-4 months, that's fine. But if I'm only going to go for a week or 2 weeks, then I think I'm doing more harm than good. Because then we're just introducing Jesus and then taking him away. Constantly. Over and over again. No wonder every time we show up, they're like, oh, you're just here and then you're just going to leave. And they're heartbroken every time. And yet we, as the people who are doing ministry and we're trying to do ministry, feel like we're contributing. Because that's what we're told, 1 or 2 people come to Christ in that. And that's because of the Holy Spirit ripening that person. But when it comes to actual ministry, leading and trying to minister to the masses, we're failing them. And I couldn't do it anymore. So as far as short-term ministry, I couldn't do it. And I bring this up because what I view as ministry is very different from what my Southern Baptist fellow believers see as ministry. I see ministry like you going into a bar at your local hometown and you're there. I don't care what you're drinking. I don't care what you're eating. You're there and you're there representing Christ and the hope that he has to offer. And you're there ready to share his news. That is ministry. Because guess what? While we were in missions in Florida or in Australia or in any other place, you're eating and drinking something. Who cares if it's water and a ham sandwich versus a beer and wings? Really, that's what we're gonna draw the line? So when I saw that priest and the priesthood, it wasn't just one, it was an entire ministry of priests that came and were there for them, for the broken, for the lost, for the people who were searching. And all I can do is feel that joy in my heart that the Lord is working. And you know how I knew that? Is by whenever my sister and I were leaving, because I'm an old person and I can only last but so far. And we were leaving and I overheard a younger woman talk about how she saw these priests and she was shocked the fact that they were there, and then started talking to her friend about how she was raised a Catholic and the bad experiences that she went through being raised as that and the things that she had to suffer through. So on my way out, I stopped her really fast and I was like, you were raised a Catholic? She goes, yes. I'm like, well, here's a Catholic priest that I spent the last 30 minutes talking to, and I think he would be really great for you to talk to. He'll be very different from any priest in a church that you could ever meet because he's here and he's willing to be here. He's willing for other people to call him a sinner, to call him a traitor, anything for you to be able to talk to him. He's standing there. That is his sacrifice. And I genuinely believe that is the sacrifice that Jesus has called us to do, is be in places where we may be persecuted, but other people would find Jesus. And I believe that is what the missions is all about. It's not about just showing up and being there as Christians. It's about showing up in places that Christians shouldn't be, and yet they are for Jesus. Do you know how hard it is for a recovering alcoholic to decide to go to a bar, so that they could participate in this ministry. That's suffering, but that's suffering for Jesus. That's suffering for his cause. And I think that's the kind of ministry that we are called to, because that is the kind of ministry we see in scripture. Going through the first of Philippians, we are introduced to Paul's story of how he became a Christian. And the first thing we know is that he was the one persecuting other actual Christians because they weren't following the law. They weren't doing what they were supposed to do. They weren't showing up to church and then showing up to the potlucks and then showing up to the events that they planned. They were going off to bars or going off to raves or going off anywhere and just, preaching Christ. Heaven forbid. And what stopped him was Jesus coming to him and saying, "Why are you persecuting me?" Just like how he stated, "I am the poor, I am the needy. Why are you persecuting me?" Yes, they're sinners. That's kind of the point, is that we're all sinners. We're sinners helping sinners. The only difference in reality is that we're sinners that have been saved. We're sinners with a hope. We're sinners with a grace that I think every sinner would ever want. But we're so busy holding that up higher and putting ourselves on a pedestal because of it that we can't even give it to them, just like how it was given to us. And I think that's worse. I understand there are many kinds of ministries out there. And I love every kind of ministry as long as you're sharing Christ. Yes, but I'm starting to wonder if we're doing more harm than good as the church, because I'm starting to realize we're sharing Christ and yet people aren't seeing it. And maybe that's because we're not actually showing them who he is. And that's the kind of person who would sit there and have a meal with a prostitute, with a tax collector, with a disabled person, with a person at a bar. I genuinely believe if Jesus were to come at this time, he would be at bars. He would be at strip clubs. He would be with drug dealers. He would be with them, because those are the people who are hurting. Those are the people who are not just hurting, but are actively searching for relief. And he is that relief. So for us as a church in the South, now that I live in it, to blame another Christian or another person of our church for going there and being a part of it and saying and judging them as if that is something that is of their character holds back our ministry. And I think that is why the church is in the state that it is, because it has created this culture where it's only safe to be with church people. I'm only safe if I hang out with church people in the right places. I can't go with my Christian friend to a bar, have a drink, enjoy ourselves, meet some other girls, have a conversation about Jesus, invite them to church the next day. That's so wrong. I don't think so. I really don't. And people will have their own arguments. They will have their own views on it, and that's fine. But that's why I'm so grateful to have this show and that I am able to speak about these perspectives and that God has given me this. And that's the only reason why I even do this, is that if there's anything that someone could learn from my experience, I'd want them to. And this is my ministry. So thank you so much for watching. And next week, we're going to talk about Paul and more of his conversion and how crazy it is just because of who he was, how he grew up. And I wanted to kind of put it in perspective. So see you next time. Thank you so much. Bye.